The gallon of milk slipped from Margaret Thorne's grasp, hitting the linoleum floor of the MegaMart dairy aisle with a sickening wet explosion. It wasn't the sound of breaking plastic that made her gasp, or the cold splash soaking her sensible canvas sneakers. It was the date stamped on the carton, now clearly visible amidst the pooling white liquid. Yesterday. She'd checked it. She always checked. Her knobby, age-spotted fingers, once nimble enough to pipe intricate buttercream roses, had turned that carton just minutes ago, reassured by the printed promise of tomorrow's date. But here it was, yesterday's betrayal leaking across the unnaturally bright floor. A familiar, acidic tang of rage, sharper than spoiled milk, rose in her throat. This wasn't the first time, not by a long shot. The bruised apples cunningly placed atop fresher ones, the BOGO chicken that rang up full price, the accidentally scanned duplicate item. The produce manager, Chad, his name tag screamed it with false cheer, perpetually shrugging, "System error, ma'am. Nothing I can do." As if she were some doddering fool who couldn't navigate a simple supermarket. Margaret Thorne, at 65, was far from a fool. She was a widow who'd balanced household budgets tighter than a drum for 40 years. She'd raised 2 children on ingenuity and clipped coupons. She'd navigated the labyrinthine bureaucracy of her late husband's medical bills. She knew value, she knew fairness, and she knew with bone-deep certainty that MegaMart, the leviathan that had swallowed the friendly neighborhood grocer whole 5 years ago, was systematically screwing its customers, especially the ones they thought wouldn't fight back. The seniors, the busy moms, the people counting pennies. As she stood there, ignored by shoppers bustling past the expanding puddle, a young employee finally arrived with a yellow caution sign and a mop bucket. He barely glanced at her, his expression bored beneath a shock of blue-dyed hair. "Sorry about that, lady. Clean up on aisle 3. The dismissiveness was the final straw. It wasn't just the spoiled milk. It was the accumulated weight of 1,000 petty indignities, the shoddy quality, the misleading labels, the endless upselling, the way MegaMart treated its customers like inconvenient widgets in a profit-maximizing machine. Margaret Thorne felt a tectonic shift within her, a slow-burning ember fanned into a fierce, focused flame. This wasn't frustration anymore. This was war. And Margaret, with a lifetime of patience and resourcefulness behind her, was uniquely qualified to wage it. Sweetly. Margaret didn't storm out. She methodically picked her way around the mess, retrieved another gallon of milk, meticulously checking its date against the overhead fluorescent glare, and completed her shopping. Her movements were precise, her face a calm mask. Inside, however, the battle plans were forming. Her weapon wouldn't be shouting or lawsuits, at least not initially. Hers would be the weapon she'd wielded for decades, community, and baked goods. Maple Creek, the town Margaret had called home for 40 years, still clung to a semblance of small-town life, though MegaMart's arrival had dented it. People knew each other. They talked over fences, at church socials, in the waiting room of Dr. Evans's cramped practice. Margaret knew where the cracks were, where dissatisfaction simmered beneath the surface of convenience. Her first salvo was subtle. At the weekly bridge club hosted by Eleanor Peterson, a formidable woman who ran the town's historical society with an iron fist disguised in lace gloves, Margaret brought her famous lemon-lavender scones. "Oh, Margaret, divine as always." Eleanor sighed, taking a delicate bite. "How do you get them so light?" Margaret smiled, pouring tea. "Just patience, Eleanor, and quality ingredients. Unlike some places." She let the pause hang, laden with meaning. "You know, I found the strangest thing at MegaMart yesterday. bought milk dated for tomorrow, but it was sour as sin when I opened it, right there on the date they printed." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "You don't say? Chad give you the runaround again?" The usual shrug. "System error." Margaret's voice was laced with weary resignation, perfectly pitched. "Seems to happen an awful lot lately, doesn't it? Doris mentioned her fresh salmon last week smelled off, and poor Mr. Henderson nearly had a fit when they tried to charge him twice for his Metamucil." The table erupted. Doris confirmed the salmon incident. Mildred Henderson chimed in about her husband's near apoplexy. Betty Chen recounted how the organic strawberries she'd bought were clearly conventional, pesticide residue and all. The scones vanished, replaced by a growing litany of MegaMart grievances. "It's disgraceful," Eleanor declared, tapping a manicured finger on the tablecloth. "Taking advantage, especially of us. Seasoned citizens." Margaret nodded, her expression sympathetic. "It feels that way, doesn't it? Like they think we don't notice or won't complain." She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "You know, I've been thinking, what if we did complain? Together?" The idea took root. Not a formal protest, not yet, but a campaign of quiet, persistent, documented dissatisfaction. Margaret became the reluctant coordinator. She created a simple shared online document, her granddaughter Chloe showed her how, titled Maple Creek Consumer Watch. It listed common issues: expired goods, mislabeled items, overcharging, poor produce quality, unhelpful staff. Members were encouraged to note the date, time, aisle, item, and employee involved if possible. They were to take photos. And crucially, they were to calmly, politely, but insistently demand corrections at the customer service desk each and every time. "Be the squeaky wheel," Margaret advised at the next bridge club, distributing printouts of the document. "But be a polite, persistent squeaky wheel. Make them log every complaint. Make it cost them time and manpower." The effect was immediate, and to MegaMart management, initially just annoying. The customer service desk, usually manned by one weary employee, suddenly needed two. The line grew longer. The complaints were specific, documented, and impossible to dismiss as simple mistakes. Chad's shrugs grew tighter, his jaw clenched. Store manager Rick Donovan, a man whose primary expression was harried indifference, started appearing more frequently, trying to placate the growing number of polite, silver-haired complainants armed with receipts and cell phone photos of wilted lettuce or misscanned items. Margaret herself became a fixture. She went in nearly daily, not for large shops, but for one or two items. She checked dates meticulously, compared shelf prices to scanned receipts, examined produce like a forensic scientist. And when she found an issue, which was distressingly often, she went to customer service. Her tone was always calm, her smile pleasant but unwavering. "Good morning, Janice," she'd say to the long-suffering service desk employee. "I believe there might be a small error here. This Greek yogurt was marked at 1, 99 on the shelf, but it's scanned at 2, 49. Could you please adjust that? And perhaps check the signage in aisle 7. She'd slide her phone across the counter, displaying a clear photo of the shelf tag. "Thank you so much." Janice, initially wary, began to develop a grudging respect for Margaret's unflappable politeness and undeniable accuracy. She started adjusting prices without argument, logging the complaints with a sigh. But Margaret knew annoyance wouldn't be enough. She needed to hit them where it hurt: reputation and the bottom line. Phase 2 involved her other weapon: baking. Maple Creek had a small but vibrant Saturday farmers market. Margaret, renowned for her skills, secured a modest stall. She didn't sell her exquisite pastries, cakes, and breads. She gave them away, with a small, tasteful sign. Compliments of Margaret Thorne. A sweet thank you for supporting real local quality. People flocked to her stall. Her melt-in-your-mouth shortbread, her decadent chocolate cherry scones, her crusty sourdough loaves. They were legendary. And the message was subtle but clear. This is what quality, care, and community taste like. This is what MegaMart can't provide. Conversations flowed as people savored her treats. Heavenly, Margaret, just heavenly. So much better than that plastic-wrapped stuff at the mart. Did you hear about Doris and the expired chicken salad? Made her sick. Rick Donovan actually snapped at Mildred Henderson yesterday. Can you believe it? They're raising prices again, you know, on everything. Margaret listened, nodded, offered sympathy, and gently steered the conversation back to the alternatives. The local butcher, the family-run produce, stand a town over, the co-op starting up in the next county. The Maple Creek consumer watch list grew longer, shared discreetly amongst neighbors. A quiet boycott of non-essential MegaMart items began to take hold among the core group. They bought their milk from the gas station, fresher surprisingly, their meat from Carl's Butcher Block, their produce from the farmer's market or roadside stands. The impact was slow but perceptible. MegaMart's weekend foot traffic in Maple Creek dipped noticeably. The lines at the express checkout grew shorter. Rick Donovan started looking genuinely stressed. Corporate memos about localized sales variances and customer satisfaction metrics began landing in his inbox. He responded the only way he knew how. Pressure on staff, more demands, fewer breaks, tighter margins. Morale plummeted. Chad's surliness turned openly hostile. One rainy Tuesday, Margaret was carefully selecting avocados. She needed them perfectly ripe for the avocado lime tart she was making for the library fundraiser. She found two promising candidates. As she reached for them, a familiar voice, sharp with false cheer, cut through the humid air of the produce section. "Find everything okay today, ma'am?" Chad loomed beside her, his arms crossed over his MegaMart vest. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just fine, thank you, Chad," Margaret replied evenly, not looking up from the avocados. "You sure spend a lot of time here," Chad persisted, his voice dropping, losing the veneer of politeness. "Checking dates? Taking pictures? Stirring up trouble with the other old biddies?" Margaret slowly straightened, meeting his gaze. Her blue eyes, usually warm, were chips of ice. "I'm ensuring I get what I pay for, young man. Something MegaMart seems to have difficulty providing consistently. And my friends and I are simply exercising our rights as consumers." Chad snorted. "Rights? You're a nuisance, a pain in the neck. Management's noticed. Corporate's noticed." He took a step closer, invading her personal space. The smell of cheap aftershave and stale coffee washed over her. "Maybe you should find somewhere else to shop. Somewhere. Easier. For everyone." It was a threat, blatant and ugly. The simmering rage Margaret had channeled into her campaign flared hot and dangerous for a second. She imagined bringing her heavy tote bag down on his smug face. Instead, she drew herself up to a full 5'4", her posture ramrod straight, radiating a lifetime of quiet dignity. "Are you threatening me, Chad?" Her voice, though quiet, carried in the near empty aisle. A nearby stalker paused, watching. "Are you suggesting that because I am a senior citizen and a loyal customer who expects fair dealing, I should be intimidated into silence or driven out?" Chad blinked, momentarily wrong-footed by her directness and the sudden attention. I I didn't say that. I just meant it might be less stressful. What's stressful, Chad? Margaret interrupted, her voice cutting like a knife, is paying premium prices for substandard goods. What's stressful is being lied to by printed dates. What's stressful is being overcharged and then dismissed when we point it out. What's stressful is being spoken to with such blatant disrespect by an employee of a store I patronize. She picked up her chosen avocados. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have shopping to finish, and rest assured I will be speaking with Manager Donovan about this extremely inappropriate conversation. She walked away, her heart pounding against her ribs, but her head held high. She felt Chad's furious gaze burning into her back. She went straight to customer service, bypassing Janice and asking directly for Rick Donovan. She recounted the interaction calmly and precisely, word for word, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. Donovan, sweating slightly in his cheap polyester tie, listened with a pinched expression. Mrs. Thorne, I'm sure Chad didn't mean. He meant to intimidate me, Mr. Donovan, Margaret stated flatly. He called myself and my friends old biddies and suggested we shop elsewhere. That is harassment. That is unacceptable. I expect corrective action, and I will be documenting this incident, along with the witnesses who overheard, on our Consumer Watch log. It will also be shared at our next Community Watch meeting. She mentioned the town's informal neighborhood watch group, knowing Donovan would picture a wider audience. Good day. She left Donovan stammering apologies that rang hollow. The encounter fueled her resolve. It was no longer just about expired milk or overcharging. It was about respect. News of Chad's confrontation spread through the Maple Creek Consumer Watch network like wildfire. Outrage replaced annoyance. Eleanor Peterson, wielding the considerable clout of the Historical Society, drafted a formal letter of complaint to MegaMart Corporate, detailing the pattern of poor quality, misleading practices, and now employee intimidation, attaching excerpts from the meticulously kept Consumer Watch log. Margaret provided the avocados, not for the tart, but as evidence, photographed with Chad clearly visible in the background of one shot. The local newspaper, the Maple Creek Chronicle, always hungry for a story that wasn't the high school football team's latest loss, got wind of it. A young, earnest reporter named Ben Carter interviewed Margaret, Eleanor, Doris, and a reluctant Mr. Henderson. The story, headlined Seniors vs. Superstore, Maple Creek customers cry foul over MegaMart practices, landed on front porches the following Thursday. It was factual, quoting the Consumer Watch log statistics and Chad's inflammatory words. It mentioned the quiet boycott and Margaret's Farmers Market initiative. Corporate finally took notice, not with contrition, but with damage control. A regional manager, a slick man named Mr. Garrity, with teeth too white and a smile too wide, descended on the Maple Creek MegaMart. He held a hastily arranged town hall meeting in the store's bleak break room. Only a handful of people attended, mostly Margaret's core group and Ben Carter, notebook poised. Garrity oozed insincere concern. We deeply value our Maple Creek customers. We take all complaints seriously. This Chad individual, a regrettable anomaly. Disciplinary action has been taken. Chad was suddenly on leave. Expired goods, a rare stocking error. We're implementing double checks. He promised lower prices, better training, a renewed commitment to community. His words were smooth, empty calories. Margaret sat quietly in the front row, her hands folded neatly in her lap. When Garrity opened the floor for questions, Eleanor was the first, her voice sharp. Disciplinary action? What specific action? And how will you ensure other employees don't resort to intimidation? Garrity floundered. Internal matter, ma'am. Rest assured. Mr. Henderson spoke up, his voice surprisingly strong. Double checks? Who's checking the checkers? Your system seems mighty error-prone. Margaret waited. When the flustered Garrity looked desperately for a friendly face, she raised her hand slightly. Mr. Garrity, she began, her voice soft but clear, cutting through the murmurs. Thank you for coming. We appreciate you listening. Garrity visibly relaxed, offering his blinding smile. You speak of value and commitment, but value isn't just low prices, it's honesty. It's respect. It's knowing that the date on the milk is real, that the price on the shelf is the price at the register, that your employees treat customers with courtesy, not contempt. She paused, letting the words sink in. We don't need promises. We need proof. We need transparency. We need to see consistent change, documented change, not just today, but next week, next month. Actions, Mr. Garrity, not words. The room was silent. Even Garrity's smile faltered. Bain Carter scribbled furiously. Margaret held the regional manager's gaze, her expression serene but unyielding. She wasn't a shrill complainer. She was a dignified, reasonable woman, stating undeniable truths. It was far more powerful than anger. The following weeks saw a flurry of superficial changes at MegaMart. The produce looked fresher, though Margaret suspected strategic culling just before inspections. More staff seemed deployed, though they often looked bewildered. A few sale prices were genuinely good. Loss leaders aimed at luring customers back. Rick Donovan became almost painfully polite. But the core issues remained. A batch of organic eggs Margaret bought scanned as conventional. The double-checked milk she purchased for the church coffee hour was sour a day before its date. The disrespect had merely gone underground, replaced by tight smiles and wary glances. Margaret knew the battle wasn't won. MegaMart was playing the waiting game, hoping the seniors would tire, that the boycott would fizzle, that the newspaper would move on. She couldn't let that happen. It was time for the masterstroke, the piece de resistance of her sweet revenge. Phase 3. The Baked Offensive. Maple Creek's annual Harvest Happening Festival was a major event. Crafts, music, food stalls, and the centerpiece. The best of Maple Creek baking competition, fiercely contested for decades. Margaret had won the Best Pie category for her Raspberry Peach masterpiece 5 years running until MegaMart arrived and her focus shifted. This year, she was entering again. But not just to win. She baked with a focused intensity she hadn't felt in years. Not one pie, but dozens. Miniatures. Her legendary Raspberry Peach, yes, but also Apple Cranberry Walnut, Salted Caramel Pecan, Deep Dark Chocolate Bourbon. She made tiny, perfect versions of her Lemon Lavender Scones, her Chocolate Cherry Bombs, her Maple Pecan Sticky Buns, hundreds of bite-sized exquisite pastries. On the day of the festival, under the crisp autumn sky, Margaret's stall wasn't just entered in the competition, it was a standalone sensation. Her sign read, Margaret Thorne's Taste of Real Quality, free samples, donations for the new community center. Welcome. She didn't mention MegaMart. She didn't need to. People queued. They tasted. They groaned with pleasure. They dropped bills into her donation jar. And as they savored the buttery crust, the vibrant fruit, the perfect balance of sweet and tart, Margaret worked the crowd with gentle grace. This peach. Incredible. Where do you get them? Someone would ask. Oh, from the Hendersons' orchard, just outside town, Margaret would reply. Picked yesterday. You can taste the sunshine, can't you? This chocolate. So rich. Single origin, fair trade. The co-op in Millersville has a wonderful selection. These walnuts in the pie. Amazing texture. Thank you. freshly cracked from this season's harvest. Carl, over at the butcher block, gets them direct from a farm in the valley. Every compliment became a subtle advertisement for a local, ethical alternative to MegaMart. Every sublime bite was a silent indictment of the supermarket's mass-produced, flavorless offerings. People walked away from her stall, not just with a sugar high, but with names and locations. Henderson's Orchard, Millersville Co-op, Carl's Butcher Block. The coup de grace came when the baking competition results were announced. Margaret won Best Pie again, her raspberry peach a unanimous decision. As she accepted the modest ribbon, the festival organizer handed her the microphone for the traditional winner's remarks. Margaret looked out over the crowd, familiar faces smiling back. Her Bridge Club comrades, neighbors, people who had signed the Consumer Watch log. She saw Ben Carter near the front, camera ready. She took a deep breath. "Thank you," she said, her voice amplified but still warm. "This ribbon is lovely, but the real joy is seeing our community come together like this, supporting each other, celebrating real, honest quality." She paused, holding up the pie. "This pie isn't just flour and fruit. It's Mrs. Henderson's peaches, ripened on the tree. It's butter churned at the dairy farm down Route 12. It's care and time and knowing where your food comes from." She smiled, a genuine, radiant smile. In a world full of shortcuts and faceless corporations, that connection, that quality, that's priceless, that's worth savoring, that's worth fighting for. The applause was thunderous. It wasn't just for the pie, it was for the sentiment, for the quiet rebellion she embodied. People understood. They felt it. The festival buzzed with renewed conversations about local sourcing, about MegaMart's shortcomings. Ben Carter got quotes. Eleanor Peterson beamed. The following Monday, Margaret received a letter. Thick, expensive paper, MegaMart corporate letterhead, addressed formally to Mrs. Margaret Thorne. With steady hands, she opened it. It wasn't from Mr. Garrity. It was from someone higher up. It acknowledged the concerns raised by the Maple Creek community. It outlined new quality control initiatives and enhanced employee training programs focusing on customer respect. It announced a formal audit of the Maple Creek store's pricing and dating practices. It offered Margaret, specifically, a $500 gift card as a gesture of goodwill. Margaret read it twice. She didn't touch the gift card enclosed. She picked up her phone and called Eleanor, then Doris, then Ben Carter. "It's a start," she told them. "Only a start. We keep the pressure on. We verify their initiatives. We keep shopping local where we can. We keep watching." She looked at the gift card, a symbol of hush money. "And we donate this to the Community Center Fund. Every penny." The battle wasn't over. MegaMart was a Goliath. But David, in this case, was a 65-year-old widow with a rolling pin, a keen eye for detail, and an army of friends armed with scones and spreadsheets. Margaret Thorne looked out her kitchen window at the golden autumn leaves. The scent of cinnamon and apples lingered in the air. She had baked her way to the first real concession. It tasted sweeter than any victory ribbon. It was the complex, satisfying flavor of justice, slowly, meticulously, and very sweetly served. The following Saturday, Margaret was back at the farmer's market. Her stall was busier than ever. People came not just for the free samples, but to chat, to share their own MegaMart encounters, to ask for the Henderson's orchard directions, to drop coins in the community center jar. A young mother juggling a toddler stopped by. "Mrs. Thorne, I just wanted to say..." "Thank you," she said, her voice earnest. "After that article and the festival, I started really looking at labels, paying attention. I took back some yogurt yesterday that was expired. I wouldn't have before. I just swallowed it, literally and figuratively. She laughed nervously. You made me feel like I could speak up, like it mattered. Margaret handed the toddler a tiny star-shaped shortbread cookie. The little girl's eyes widened with delight. It always matters, dear, Margaret said gently, meeting the young mother's eyes. Your voice matters. Your choices matter. Never let anyone make you feel otherwise. As the woman walked away, the little girl happily munching her cookie, Margaret felt a deep, quiet warmth spread through her, different from the heat of anger, more enduring than the thrill of confrontation. It was the warmth of connection, of empowerment shared. She looked across the bustling market square. Carl the butcher joking with a customer, old Mr. Henderson selling his last bushel of peaches, Eleanor holding court at the Historical Society booth. This was her community. This was what she was fighting for. Later that afternoon, she made her weekly trip to MegaMart. She needed cat food and laundry detergent, things she couldn't easily source locally yet. She moved through the brightly lit aisles with her usual quiet vigilance. She checked dates. She compared prices. She noted the new, slightly desperate, everyday low prices. Banners hanging everywhere. At the dairy case, she reached for a small carton of cream. As she checked the date, a full week away, progress, she sensed someone beside her. She turned. It was Janice, the customer service employee, off duty, wearing jeans and a faded band t-shirt. She looked tired, but offered Margaret a small, genuine smile. Just grabbing some milk for the kids, Janice said, her voice low. Date's good today. She hesitated, then added, almost whispering. They had Chad back for a shift last night. Stocking. Manager Donovan's watching him like a hawk. Corporate audit starts Monday. She gave Margaret a quick, significant look before grabbing her milk and heading towards the checkout. Margaret watched her go. A tiny spark of solidarity. An insider acknowledging the fight. She finished her shopping, her step lighter. At the checkout, the young cashier scanned her items carefully. The total came up. Margaret checked her receipt meticulously. It was correct. Have a nice day, ma'am, the cashier said, her voice polite, if not warm. You too, Margaret replied, offering a small, dignified smile. She pushed her cart out into the autumn sunlight, the familiar blue MegaMart bag holding her necessary evils. The fight continued. Vigilance was eternal. But as she walked home, the scent of fallen leaves crisp in the air, she knew something fundamental had shifted. MegaMart hadn't been toppled, but its armor was dented. The illusion of its benevolent, unavoidable dominance in Maple Creek was shattered. People were awake. They were questioning. They were choosing. And Margaret Thorne, the unlikeliest of warriors, had proven that even against a Goliath, the weapons of truth, community, and perfectly baked lemon-lavender scones could be devastatingly effective. Her revenge wasn't fiery or destructive. It was a slow, steady reclamation of dignity and choice. It was the sweetest kind of all. She hummed a little tune as she walked, a recipe for apple butter forming in her mind. There was always more baking to do. The community center fundraiser needed her. And Maple Creek, she thought, tasting the crisp air, was going to be just fine.